In tonight's news edition, Prime Minister Abdullah arrives in Kuwait to join Jordan's delegation to the 3rd Arab-Africa Summit headed by His Majesty the King. French President François Hollande calls on Israel to halt its settlement buildings during a meeting with Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas in Ramallah. And Russia steps up a diplomatic push for Syrian peace talks and says a peace conference could happen before the end of the year. Good evening and welcome to the news. His Majesty the King, the Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces, attended a military exercise carried out by the Hussein bin Ali 30th Special Mission Brigade. On his arrival to the site, the King was welcomed by Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mash'al Zabin, and senior army officers. The King also toured a military exhibition where military vehicles and weapons used by the brigade were on display. He watched live shooting with various weapons manufactured by the King Abdullah Design and Development Bureau. King Abdullah also visited the command of the Joint Special Operations, where he was briefed by its commander on issues regarding training as well as duties of the Joint Special Operations Command. Prime Minister Abdullah arrived in Kuwait to join Jordan's delegation to the 3rd Arab-Africa Summit that will be headed by His Majesty the King. The summit, which kicks off tomorrow, is held under the slogan, Partners in Development and Investment. Upon arrival in Sur, was welcomed by Kuwaiti Prime Minister Sheikh Jabir al-Mubarak al-Hamad al-Sabah and a number of Kuwaiti and Jordanian officials. During the visit, the Prime Minister will also meet a number of Kuwaiti officials and participants in the summit. Jordan has presented an official request to the United Nations seeking candidacy for a Security Council seat for the 2014-2015 term. Foreign Minister Nasser Judeh said he made a telephone call with UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon and informed him that the kingdom has presented an official request for candidacy for Security Council's non-permanent seat for the Asia-Pacific bloc. Judeh told the UN chief that Jordan's decision comes after Saudi Arabia announced that it will not take up this seat, stressing that Jordan respects the Saudi decision. The minister affirmed that Jordan's decision comes after consultations His Majesty the King had with Saudi King Abdullah bin Abdulaziz and a number of Arab and world leaders. He noted that Jordan did its utmost to preserve these principles and to work towards achieving peace and security in the Middle East and the world. French President François Hollande called on Israel to halt settlement building on occupied Palestinian territories, saying it hampers chances for a peace agreement with the Palestinians. After a public signing of economic aid and development agreements, Hollande said France had donated more in budget support to the Palestinians than to any other nation. Abbas described settlements as the greatest threat that could end the peace process and lead to its failure.
We are committed to 9 months of negotiations. There is no discussion or disagreement when it comes to this subject. The third point is that we also agreed with the U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry, who from his side made an agreement with the Israeli side not to go to international institutes which we are entitled to go after the UN General Assembly resolution in return to the release of 104 prisoners by Israel. There is a misunderstanding by the Israelis. They mix the release of prisoners with the continuation of settlement building, and this is not true.
I will repeat it today. France is against settlements and calls for the end to settlement building because that complicates the negotiations and it compromises the two-state solution.
UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon hopes a conference to end the war in Syria can be convened in around a month's time. The comments came as the Syrian government delegation, led by Syrian Deputy Foreign Minister Faisal Miqdad, met Russian officials to discuss plans for an international peace conference on the conflict in Syria. Russia has stepped up a diplomatic push for Syrian peace talks and said a peace conference could happen before the end of the year. Moscow hosted Syrian and Iranian delegations for separate rounds of talks today in a renewed effort for a Syrian peace conference in which Moscow says Tehran must also play a role. Syria's national coalition agreed last week to attend peace talks but said there could be no future role for President Bashar al-Assad in Syria.
If our proposal to the Syrian opposition to meet in Moscow is still viable and we can confirm it, then we will try to build on all the positive tendencies. In principle, we feel that the approach towards the Geneva peace talks became more realistic, both on the part of the Syrian National Coalition and on the part of the whole range of our Western partners.
Russian President Vladimir Putin told Iranian President Hassan Rouhani there was a real chance to resolve the international standoff over Tehran's nuclear program. The Kremlin said Putin and Rouhani had spoken by telephone at the Russian leader's request 2 days before negotiators from Iran and 6 world powers hold their next talks. The Kremlin also said Putin and Rouhani also discussed the conflict in Syria and expressed support for efforts to convene an international peace conference. The 6 powers hope the talks could produce an agreement that would be the first step towards a comprehensive deal to end the standoff with Tehran. In Egypt, the army was out in force in Cairo's Tahrir Square ahead of the 2-year anniversary of the deaths of over 40 protesters during clashes near the square. Numerous political groups have called for a protest to mark the November 19th anniversary, leading to fears that clashes could break out between rival protests with the security forces in the country. Police and army sealed off Cairo's Tahrir Square on the eve of a planned major rally to commemorate bloody clashes 2 years ago. The Egyptian authorities have blamed Islamist militants for the high-profile shooting death of an Interior Ministry Lieutenant Colonel Mohammed Mabrouk, who was killed after a 3-month curfew and state of emergency were lifted. Meanwhile, more than 20 people died and 28 injured when a train crashed into a pickup truck and a minibus near the capital, Cairo. The freight train was traveling from the city of Beni Suef and hit the vehicles at a crossing near Giza district. Many of those killed on the bus were members of an extended family returning from a wedding. The head of the Egyptian Railway Authority said that the drivers of the vehicles had ignored warning lights and chains blocking entry to the crossing. Kidnappers freed Libya's deputy intelligence chief a day after he was abducted from Tripoli's international airport. Security sources said Mustafa Nuh, head of the agency's espionage unit, was bundled into a car yesterday as he left Tripoli airport. The top security official in Libya's eastern city of Benghazi survived a car bomb attack, but the attack killed one of his guards and another is seriously injured. Local witnesses said the attacker drove towards the vehicle carrying Colonel Abdullah al-Suwaiti before leaving the vehicle and running off as the blast went off. Over to the United States, where a fast-moving storm system triggered multiple tornadoes that killed at least 6 people and flattened large parts of a town in Illinois as it tore across the Midwest. The tornadoes leveled scores of homes and demolished entire neighborhoods. Some 80 tornado reports were received, along with reports of damaging winds and large hail. The National Weather Service confirmed preliminary EF4 tornado damage in Washington County in southern Illinois, with winds of 267 to 322 kilometers per hour. The American Red Cross worked with emergency management officials to set up shelters and provide assistance. We begin with the Argentina Championship. Arsenal beat Boca Juniors 3-2 at home to deny Boca a place at the top of the championship. Nicolas Aguirre, Milton Carvalho and Ramiro Carrera scored for Arsenal, and Boca Juniors' Matias Caruso scored after heading in from a corner kick. Boca came back in the 76th minute with another goal, but needed the win to jump to the top of the table. Arsenal's win puts them in 4th place with 28 points, while Boca Juniors are 5th with 27 points. And the Belgian football team trained in Brussels ahead of tomorrow's friendly match against Japan. At a news conference, Belgian coach Mark Wilmots told journalists he thinks the Japanese have a very good team on paper. He also said there was no point in comparing his side with rivals and neighbours, the Netherlands. Both sides have qualified for next summer's FIFA World Cup finals in Brazil. Finally, a quick look at the weather forecast. Unstable weather conditions will continue to affect the country tonight, with scattered thundery showers across many areas, while winds will be northeasterly changing to northwesterly brisk blowing dust in the desert region. Local showers and heavy downpours at times are also in the forecast for tomorrow, with northeasterly dust-blowing winds. The port city of Aqaba should expect light rain tonight, with northerly moderate winds and slightly choppy seas tomorrow. The weatherman warns of poor visibility due to dust-blowing winds and advises motorists to take extra caution. People are also advised to stay away from low-lying areas. Next are the lows and highs for tonight and tomorrow. And to close, here is a reminder of the day's top stories. Prime Minister Abdullah arrives in Kuwait to join Jordan's delegation to the 3rd Arab-Africa Summit headed by His Majesty the King. French President François Hollande calls on Israel to halt its settlement buildings during a meeting with Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas in Ramallah. And Russia steps up a diplomatic push for Syrian peace talks and says a peace conference could happen before the end of the year. And that's the end of tonight's news. I'm Ra'ad Liptouj. Thanks for watching and have a good night.